have a watch party and watch it.
Well, one of the other persons was trying to push a show called Bogasol or something like that. That's more supernatural than the terror.
The tale is very supernatural. There's
That's
a
true.
demonic polar bear. It doesn't get more supernatural than
Vampire that is immortal.
That's what God's polar bear. What
A
else do you
shape-shifting vampire
Right.
that's immortal.
That'd be
Cursed.
Alright, I think we're about ready to start.
Are we ready?
So you guys got through chapter 1?
Yeah.
Well-
Let's read volume one.
Oh yeah, it's all volume one.
The nice thing is they have these little summaries at the beginning of the chapter.
Oh,
Everything
nice.
Cliff Notes version.
You can just read it. And then, like you can see, it says, sees why none but Christ could speak to his condition. This is a woman who had fasted 22 days. You know what I mean? So then it's like, oh,
All right there.
you got it all.
Highlights.
Alright, so
What does George Fox say? No. You know what I'm referring to, right?
yeah. Okay, so Wesley's on the Zoom, and he's on a work call, so he probably won't respond, but you can say hi to Wesley.
Hi, Wesley.
No, absolutely.
Abby's working, so we are all here.
Get some normal work hours.
And now that we're all here, we're not all there.
Since we just got the books on Saturday, we aren't reading the book. We're going to jump ahead to finding answers together. And that looks weird on the screen, so. The question we have is, what's up with 1 Corinthians 11, 2 through 16?
I'm just laughing at the sculpture.
That is actually done by the same guy that did the Lincoln Memorial.
Oh, yeah.
So
Okay.
it's kind of cool. So just before we get too far started, if anybody's watching online, there is adult themes in this one, so you may not want kids to watch. So Gideon needs to stay out of the room.
What was the question? Oh my gosh.
None of us asked this question.
Was it my question? Definitely wasn't my question.
Everybody looked questioningly at last week's verses, so I was like, yep, we're going to do it. So, alright, so 1 Corinthians chapter 11, 2 through 16.
Angels. Sign of the angels on her forehead.
Now I commend you because you remember me in everything and maintain the traditions even as I delivered them to you. But I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of a wife is her husband, and the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head, but every wife who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head, since it is the same as if her head were shaven. For if a wife will not cover her head, then she should cut her hair short. But since it is disgraceful for a wife to cut off her hair or shave her head, let her cover her head. For a man ought not cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. For man was not made from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. He's not very feminist, obviously. So, that is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. Nevertheless, in the Lord, women are not independent of man, nor man of woman. For as woman was made from man, a man is now born of woman, and all things are from God. Judge for yourself. Is it proper for a wife to pray to God with her head uncovered? Does not nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it is a disgrace for him? But if a woman has long hair, it is her glory. For her hair is given her for a covering. If anyone is inclined to be contentious, we have no such practice, nor does the Church of God.
So, Samson?
So,
Just a special case.
Don't cheat at his riddles, though.
before we go too much farther, the essence of this passage is speaking of modesty. That's what it means. So, the problem with it, though, is Paul uses interesting wording, and it's difficult to translate. And that's why a lot of weird practices have come about because of this passage. And again, we will have adult themes, so
I thought that was the adult thing.
Oh no.
we're going to get deeper. So, what's Paul talking about? So we have hair, hair length, head coverings, praying, prophesying, men, women, and angels. You know, just the normal things, right? Every worship service should talk about these things. So in verse 4 it says, every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. Do you need that played again?
Yeah, that's bad.
Which we definitely are not, actually.
Definitely not.
So they all have their heads covered, right?
Yeah.
So Paul is a devout Pharisee, and by his own testimony, he kept the traditions of the law.
So we do that.
So he would be wearing something similar to that when he prays or prophesies.
So what the heck was he talking about, right?
Is he saying that all these men are dishonoring God by wearing their traditional head covering?
Pretty sure no.
Because still today, if you go into a Hebrew service, they will have a yarmulke on. At least a yarmulke. So this leads me to believe that there's more being said here than just head coverings. So in verse 5 it says, but every wife who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head, since it is the same as if her head was shaven. For if a wife will not cover her head, then she should cut her hair short. But since it is disgraceful for a wife to cut her hair or shave her head, let her cover her head.
I just find that Angel's hairstyle funny.
Look at Disney.
It's like, yeah.
So this is what one the New Interpreter's Bible commentary has to say about this section. It says, what are we to make of these head coverings and Paul's dogged insistence that they be worn? At the outset, we must acknowledge that it is not clear just what Paul means by head coverings.
Yeah, when he was Saul, he was a representative of the Sanhedrin out to hunt down Christians.
Yeah. So this
He was
is
considered a very upstanding member of them.
this is from one of the most in-depth commentaries that was published in 2004. So it's 20 years old. And this is what he has to say about it. We don't know what he's talking about.
Over 2,000 years later, we have no clue what he's talking about. Here we got it.
Here's what the Dictionary of New Testament Background has to say. Some scholars have argued that Paul addressed not genuine head coverings, but merely hair piled up on the head. But the best evidence for this hairstyle being widespread dates to a generation after Paul. So, the beehive hair
Probably wasn't in good style.
it's they thought maybe that might be something that he was talking about, but again, they
We
don't
don't know.
know. And this was published in 2000, so again, it's fairly recent when it comes to biblical literature and commentaries, but they don't know. And again, from the Dictionary of New Testament Background, I can't read, so I'll just go on. People in the ancient Mediterranean
Very biblical stuff.
covered their heads for various reasons. Mourning, shame, and Roman worship were among the most common reasons for covering one's head. Does that painting remind you of anything recently? This is what the Olympics was actually trying to do. They weren't doing the Last Supper. So, a Greek and Greek and Roman culture, they had various traditions around head coverings and worship. Some temples required head coverings and others did not. The ones that did not require head coverings usually revolved around sensual aspects of human nature. That would include temples to Aphrodite, Eros, and Dionysus. This is the Feast of Dionysus.
Where crazy drunken women would dance around and kill people.
And I did try to cover up the most revealing one.
Yeah, we noticed.
Trying to be.
We still notice this is what you mean.
Probably just heightened your awareness of it. So, the passage speaks of hair on both men and women and coverings for both. They also cover or coverings is a word that's most problematic in this passage. So in verse 6, if a wife will not cover her head, she should cut her hair short. But since it's disgraceful for a wife to cut her hair, off her hair or shave her head, let her cover her head. Oops. And 13, judge for yourselves. It is proper for a wife to pray to God with her head uncovered. And the most controversial of all of them. But if a woman has long hair, it is her glory. For her hair is given to her for a covering.
Well, they get cold really easily, so.
That does come up in the literature that I read. So I underlined all the coverings. So we'll go through verse 6. This is what the Greek word is. And I tried to get it so that you could see it. They're both from the same root word.
Kakahalito.
That's how
Kakahalito. Kakahalito.
I could be reading this wrong, but I was just noticing that previous slide where it's like, it just seemed like the format, like Paul commonly, he'll say what people are saying, you know, what their question is, what their concern is. And it sounds like he's saying that this is what I think, but really he's just saying, hey, this is what's being said, let me now answer it. But like the last part, it seemed like he was saying like, you're saying all this stuff, but he's like, listen, I'm gonna let you judge whether or not a woman should do it, because I mean her hair is for her glory, and it's like a covering already. She probably shouldn't cut it because that's kind of shameful. So it's almost like he's saying like, yeah, you guys are worried about this, but listen, her hair is doing the job just fine. Just leave her be. I don't know, maybe I'm reading it wrong, but what do you guys think about that?
We'll get into that.
That's what your mom's doing.
Literally. So, in verse 13, again, it's uncovered in this aspect, and they add an A to the word, and the A is for uncovered. So, and it's again the same basic word.
Akatakalitos. Akatakalitos. Akatakalitos.
Yes, I'm going to keep repeating it.
Guess I'm gonna
So
repeat.
those are both from this. All three of those are from the same root word, and it means covering or covered. And then in the last verse, again, it's covering. So you would expect that it would be a similar word, except it's not.
Parabola. Parabola.
Peribulio. Io.
Oh, that's an I. That's not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Italian, I know.
Well, ancient Rome was the basis for Italy.
I thought we were speaking Greek though.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, it's in
I mean,
Greek,
they are-
so, but they do use a lot of Greek words in Latin and everywhere else. So this word is interesting because it can be translated as garment, that which is thrown around, an article of apparel that covers much of the body, a covering, a wrap, cloak, or robe. And that's from the Greek English lexicon and other early Christian literature. And my PowerPoint is saying that it doesn't want to work today.
How's power?
Alright, so it's only used twice in the entire Bible. And it's used in 1 Corinthians, and the other time it's used is in Hebrews. And in Hebrews 1:12 it says, like a robe you will roll them up, like a garment they will be changed. But you are the same, and your years will have no end. So in Hebrews, it talks about, it most likely does mean robe, because the context is speaking of a human life wearing out, like old garments. But in 1 Corinthians, it also speaks of coverings and head coverings, but the aspect that makes it questionable is that they put it with, they're speaking of men and women's hair along with the covering. So men shouldn't cover their hair and women should, yet men wear hair coverings in Hebrew worship. And women do as well. But
And we are completely aware that Paul was one of the higher end members of society at that point. And like, he
Yeah.
was a literal representative of the Sanhedrin on a mission. And I'm fairly certain he did what most Jewish people do.
yeah. Let
Which
me
is-
get my
Where'd
PowerPoint
it
back
go? Where'd it
up.
go?
How old is the younger?
I'm not for sure totally actually. It is very old. It's a tradition that they've used for quite some time. And they don't all use yarmulkes. Some of them use hats.
Yeah, I just wondered, somebody must have invented a yarmulke at some point.
Well, would that be going back to Exodus when they were making the robes for the temple priest and stuff like that? Would it go back to that far? They went pretty in depth on making priest stuff.
Yeah, the yarmulke probably comes during the exile. But they all had the prayer shawl that they would wear over their heads when they prayed. and those had to be made a certain way. So this is from a article written in 2004, and he says traditionally exegetes have conjectured that Paul was insisting on that the pneumatic women leaders wear a veil according to Jewish custom. Yet verse 15 maintains that women have their hair instead of a head covering.
Wait, what?
And thus militates against such an interpretation in a very convoluted argument which can no longer be unraveled completely. Paul addresses several points for this custom or hair fashion.
I'm just reading the note of where that's quoting from.
Yeah.
That was where my what came from.
Yep.
Adult theme.
Wait, what?
Adult themes. It's from an article written entitled Paul's Argument from Nature for the Veil in 1 Corinthians 13 through 15, a testicle instead of head covering.
Just a single testicle.
Yeah.
Just a single one, yes.
One really big one.
That's a type of angel thing. We're going to learn about soon.
So, it's a very serious article, by the way, from the Journal of Biblical Literature. All right, so Martin continues. Similarly, Victor Paul furnished comments. There is no doubt that Paul also means to provide a theological basis for his instructions about the hairstyle of women who pray or prophesy. But in this case, his argument is obscure, at least to modern interpreters, and it may well have seemed unsatisfactory even to the apostle himself. At any rate, in the end, he abandons argument altogether by suggesting that if his directives are not followed, the Corinthians will be departing from the convention that obtains other congregations. So he's saying either do this or don't, but don't. We're not going to really fight about it, and and expect that people that do wear head coverings are going to shun you. So, and he continues, the rationale for the natural shame of a man with long hair is obscure. Especially problematic is the statement that a woman's long hair is given to her as a covering in verse 15b. As traditionally understood, this statement nullifies the previous argument that a woman should wear a covering since her long hair apparently serves that purpose, which is what you were saying.
Well, I was just referring to Paul's common use of argument, or a common argument style,
Yeah.
when addressing churches' issues and questions like, Paul, should we do this? Is it okay that we do this? We want to have sex with my mother-in-law, is that okay?
No, it's not. So
Not my mother-in-law.
that would be awkward since she is here on Sunday.
For that reason.
So it sounds as if Paul is nullifying.
Oh, you're on.
Okay.
It sounds as if Paul's saying that they don't need the covering because the hair is a covering. So, a satisfactory explanation of this argument from nature should resolve the apparent contradiction and enable this argument to support Paul's contention that women should wear a veil in public worship. So basically what he's saying is, if the hair is her covering and her glory, why should she cover it with something else? Is what the question is. There has to be something else, or Paul wouldn't bring it up in such a way. So, Eos, parabolia, however you say that.
Ryu. It's an I.
IU, can have different uses outside of Scripture. Again, we said that it was only used twice in Scripture. And since that word is contrasted with hair, which is part of the body, the physiological semantic domain of that word in 1 Corinthians becomes particularly relevant. Euripides uses this word in reference to a body part, and this is his discussion of Hercules. He casts Hercules as complaining, "After I received my bags of flesh, which are the outward sign of puberty, I receive labors about which I shall undertake to say what is necessary." So in Euripides' discussion on Hercules, this word is used, and Martin translates it as bags of flesh or male genitalia, because it's the outward sign of puberty. The relevant phrase is, you can read it in Greek, and this is an argument against what Martin has to say from a guy named Goodacre, and it's in the same publication, but this one is published in 2011, so we're getting closer to contemporary times, but it takes a long time for biblical research to happen. So he says that the present participle in that phrase, to obtain puberty, to be in the prime of youth, is a transferred epithet agreeing with the word in question. That which is thrown around, covering or clothing, which is plural. The phrase is naturally construed as youthful clothes of flesh, youthful garbs of flesh. Martin is right that youth and adolescence are in view here, but his literalistic reading misses the point that Euripides is simply using a clothing metaphor. Hercules has come of age and has put on his young man's flesh. It is not a reference to a body part. So, according to Goodacre, Euripides uses this word to say that Hercules has just put on the flesh of a young man at puberty, like changing clothes, not a particular body part.
No longer a kid.
Right. So Martin doesn't much care about what he has to say. He actually writes another article later on, but this is in his first one. He says, ancient medical conceptions confirm this association with his understanding that it should be testicle instead of clothing. The Hippocratic authors hold that hair is hollow and grows primarily from either a male or female's reproductive fluid or semen flowing into it and
I
congealing.
definitely not read this.
Hippocrates, since hollow body parts create a vacuum and attract fluid, hair attracts semen. So according to Hippocrates, hair is hollow and it attracts semen. It sucks it up like a vacuum.
I'm pretty sure that's not how it works.
This is ancient medical. So, hair grows most prolifically from the head because the brain is the place where semen is produced, or at least stored.
Sorry, okay.
Yeah, he did.
So, according to Hippocrates, the semen's stored in the head, and
Yeah, they didn't know biology.
this
Well,
is
I don't know. I mean, it's your hormones are produced from your brain stuff as well. You know, the pinnacle thing, whatever I think it's called, pineal. It's the reason why it's pineal. Sounds very similar to something.
In Greek mythology, the gods came out of their father in fully adult
So
They didn't understand.
the reason they come up with this is because of the natural growth of the human body. Things change when you hit puberty, and they're trying to explain it. And this is ancient medical texts, and these texts were actually used clear into the medieval periods of time. So we're not, it seems crazy now, but we're like less than 400 years away from this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting.
I'm kind of amazed that they reached those conclusions.
So our slides aren't updating anymore, so
The slides aren't sliding.
nope. So we'll just go to the whole class. I don't know if the people are updating either, because I am.
You mean like, what's the happy side?
Yeah. So, going on, hair grows only on the head of prepubescent humans because semen is stored in the brain and the channels of the body have not yet become large enough for the reproductive fluid to travel throughout the body. Again, according to Hippocrates. At puberty, secondary hair growth in the pubic area marks the movement of the reproductive fluid from the brain to the rest of the body. Women have less body hair, not only because they have less semen, but also because their colder bodies do not froth the semen throughout their bodies, but reduce semen evaporation at the end of their hair.
Yeah, we're not endorsing this line of thought, I'm pretty sure.
I just want a latte.
No, I'm not saying that this is current medical understanding, but this is what Paul was reading at that time. And the people, contemporaries of Paul. So, a man with long hair retains much or all of his semen, and his long hollow hair draws the semen towards his head area, but away from his genital area, where it should be ejected. Therefore, 1 Corinthians 11:14 correctly states that it is a shame for a man to have long hair, since the male nature is to eject rather than to retain semen. In contrast, the nature of woman is to draw up semen and congeal it into a fetus.
Or just get longer hair.
So according to this ancient Greek medicine, the hair is a channel for semen to flow, and a woman should have long hair so that she can absorb more semen so that a fetus can grow. So it traps it keeps it in so that it can all come together.
I line of thought
Are you seeing what Martin's trying to get at here?
Yeah, he's like,
According
he
to-
justified the use of the word by Paul as
Right.
a covering and like what more might mean. It's like maturity
Right.
and adulthood. Like
So- This conception of hair as part of the female genitalia explains the favorite Hippocratic test for sterility in women. And that test is they place something aromatic into the woman, and if the uterus is blocked, they could not smell the aroma in the hair or the mouth. And if it was open, they could. Thank God medical science has changed. Because they put an onion inside. That doesn't sound very hygienic.
Wow.
So this is kind of his conclusion of the first article that he wrote. The masculine functional counterpart of long feminine hair then is the testicle. Aristotle calls the male testicles weights that keep the seminal channels taut. And their function is to facilitate the drawing of semen downward so it can be ejected. Without them, the seminal channels drawn draw up inside the body, and the male becomes unable to dispense semen into a female. The female is not given such weights, but instead develops a hollow uterus and appropriate vessels to draw the semen upward. Thus, testicles do not develop at puberty for females as they do for males. Long feminine hair assists the uterus in drawing semen upward and inward. Masculine testicles are connected to the brain by two channels, facilitate the drawing of semen downward and outward. Long hair is a glory for the female, but a shame for a male, as Paul correctly states in 1 Corinthians 11:14 and 15. So that's the conclusion of why he says it's shameful for a woman to cut her hair, is because she's not wanting to participate in nature.
That all comes before he says it's about the
It's after the statement about the angels, and he goes on and explains why you need to keep your head covered. So this is his argument response to Goodacre, and the Greek word here means testicle, just so you know. I'm not going to try to read it because I couldn't find a pronunciation of it, but I believe it's Doris, actually, because that weird symbol at the end is an S. Both genders thus it means testicles, but the appearance and function of these differ slightly between genders. A female testicle or ovary is flat, thin, and small, and plays a marginal role in her genital system. This is according to Hippocrates, not modern science. In contrast, the male's testicle is large, hollow, and porous. It plays a most significant role in drawing the blood-like fluid and concocting it into pure semen. Referring to a male testicle as a bag thus distinguishes it and its function from the female's, since she does not have a bag. If the English word for testicles, for example, could refer both to male testicles and female ovaries, then the English writer would need to use a colloquial expression such as balls or nuts to specify the meaning of the male testicles. Since the Greek word does not refer to male body parts lacking in a woman, the word does not therefore fit the contextual requirements of 1 Corinthians 11:15. Paul must use a colloquial word to specify a male's testicle and its function in contrast to the female's genital system, and the word he uses is parabolic, which is best rendered in English as testicle. So interesting, isn't it? You don't have to agree. So
I'm wondering how they reached that conclusion.
Hercules. That's how. Yeah, the dude writing about Hercules and his coming to
and they do also refer to ancient Greek sensual poetry as well in his article. I didn't think we needed to read all that, but you're more than welcome to on your own time. So the covering that is a woman's glory is her hair. And the ancient medical writings regard the woman's hair as part of the reproductive system. So according to Martin, Paul used the discussion about hair and covering the hair as a euphemism for genitalia, or the woman's version of testicles. Like Euripides used the same word as a euphemism when discussing the coming of age of Hercules. And both Goodacre and Martin both agree that it was a metaphor of coming of age, or puberty. So in worship at Greek and Roman temples, hair was to be covered unless it was within a temple promoting fertility or sensuality. When the church began to grow, they began to believe in religious liberty. The verse in Galatians says, "There's neither Jew nor Greek nor slave. There's neither slave nor free. There is no male and female, for you are all one in Christ." So this liberty led some of the women in the church in Corinth to abandon the practice of covering their head. And that caused some people outside of the church to believe that the church was similar to the cult of Aphrodites, which was located in Corinth as well. So if you read a lot of ancient Roman arguments about Christians and why they needed to persecute them, it was because they were having orgies in their worship. Because in liturgy in ancient times, if you weren't a baptized Christian, they shut the doors of the worship space and you couldn't see what went on after the priest gave the sermon. And that's when the Eucharist was given. So they had a bunch of ideas of what was going on, and one of them was that they were all having orgies in the worship service because the women didn't have their head covered. So lots has changed since then. So according to Martin, Paul is referring to the contemporary usage of the human body when he wrote these words. And that Paul was saying that women should cover their hair because it's as if she's naked. She's showing off her womanness. But in verse 10 it says that is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. So the question last week was, why does he say because of the angels?
He sounds like he's tripping a little bit, to be honest.
Except we just went over how they thought anatomy worked back then.
So in Genesis 6, 1 through 4,
Giant fine tester like we discussed.
when man began to multiply on the face of the land and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw the daughters of men were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. When the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them, these were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown." So, sons of God in this are sons of Elohim, which we talked about a few weeks ago. And in Greek, they translate the sons of God as angels. So this is where the because of the angels comes in. Now, why would he say something like that?
So in the Greek it says sons of God as opposed to like messenger. That's why I usually think of angels messenger.
Right.
But
In Hebrew it said sons of God, sons of Elohim.
I was just wondering what the Greek word
The
means.
Greek used, because they didn't have, it didn't translate well, so they used angels for spiritual being. Not God, but another spiritual being they called angels or demons. And that's where angels and demons come from. So in Hebrew they're all the same word until you get into exile, then they start talking about demons as I can't remember the word. But the Greek and Roman cultures believed in demigods, or the offspring of human and gods, and these were usually great people like Heracles. And Paul's saying that yes, this can happen, but it's not good. It leads to destruction. So what all of that is basically saying, this can happen, it's not good, so let's be modest and not tempt the angels.
I thought his last thing was just don't wear covering. Do what you want. You judge.
He's
Like, wasn't that? I thought he was just saying, like, I understand your reasoning. You think that someone's going to come and impregnate your hair, an angel's going to come get you.
yeah.
And he's showing their, that's why I said earlier, like he typically does when he's addressing these churches who are gotten into weird stuff.
Yeah.
He's like, look, you believe this. You believe this. He's not condoning it. He's repeating it just so that everyone knows what they believe. And then he says his answer, which is, you judge. Hey, the hair is the glory, the covering is good. Just let it be.
The wording is, yes, be your own judge, but if you don't cover your head, the rest of the churches are going to look down on you.
It doesn't say the rest of the churches are going to look down on it, does you? Does it? I mean, I thought it said that we don't want contention. Like, we don't want fighting.
He's saying we don't want contention.
So don't try to spread your religious
So
beliefs.
he's saying they may take offense to it, so don't allow that.
Or is he saying you guys stop fighting? Like, what does it exactly say? I mean,
it
that
could
seems
be
like a
both,
big jump
so-
going from one to the other. Like, guys, stop fighting about it versus the other churches are going to judge you, so maybe you should just cover your head so that the other churches don't judge you.
Did you say something, Wesley?
I think that was parabolic.
What how do you say parabola?
Oh man,
Parabola, you should like join us for the rest of talking to you.
it's not going to go back. It's doing its thing.
I don't have my
so-
phone on me, so I don't have a Bible, but
There
it's
was a
on my
Bible somewhere behind you.
Here.
So
But what are you looking for?
11,
There's
16.
Oh gosh, I don't know how to find that.
There's a table of contents in the beginning.
Let's see, Control F. There's no Control F button here.
So basically,
Sorry.
what it's getting at, what Martin is saying, and this is within the last 10 years is where this is coming out. He's saying that the reason that the Romans and Greeks cover their hair in the temples was for the same reason. They didn't want to tempt the angels.
Oh shoot, I opened to it. Now there's a mirror.
So, and that's what his argument is the covering is as if the woman is showing off her body in worship, and we shouldn't be promoting that sort of thing, so let's be modest.
So I guess putting aside all the stuff about the testicles, I mean that's really just a super traditional interpretation of the passage, right? It's just immodest to
Yeah,
shave your hair. I mean,
he's literally just trying to be he's being as blunt as he can be, but
But you're saying that doesn't really change, like, how we're already reading it.
no, it
well, it's
really
different
doesn't
from how
change
hair-
it.
hair reads it.
The
I guess
church-
I'm saying it's a
The churches of God has no
like
custom
conservative.
as far as covering your head to watch out for the angels. He's saying, but if anyone is disposed to be contentious, arguing about this, we have no such custom. In other words, we have no such custom about
Right.
what? What's the custom? It's not argument.
Yeah, we don't have a custom about it, but
About what?
about covering the head in.
And neither do the other churches. So this concern about, my gosh, this semen attracting hair is going to get uncovered and maybe, get impregnated. I mean, that was a concern the Corinthians had.
Right.
They were Hellenistic, right? So they were a mixture of like Jews who hung out with Greeks or whatever, and they're mixing everything. They're mixing up this idea that, oh my gosh, my follicles are going to absorb some angel semen, and they're like, shoot, we better have these ladies covered up, right? Just so the sons of God don't get you, right? That's what Paul's saying. He's saying, right, you're worried about the sons of God getting in the ladies' hair? Well, I'll let you be the judges of whether or not you should cover up those ladies' hair. But I mean, to me, I think it's her glory. And it was given to her as a covering. And if anyone is disposed to still argue about this, just know, although the church is not our custom. So to me, I think it's like saying a complete opposite thing of what.
Okay, so verse 16 says, if anyone is inclined to be contentious, so if somebody wants to pick a fight,
right,
is what he's saying.
Right.
We don't have a practice.
Right, if you guys want to keep arguing about this.
And nor does the church. So just cover your hair, is what he's saying.
He's not saying, he doesn't end it with just cover his hair. He's saying, do what he's ending it with, you be the judge.
It's not
her hair is the covering.
Very unclear because you guys both have entirely opposite ways.
Yes.
You're reading 16.
Well, I'm just basing it off of the way Paul usually presents an argument. He says it like he's pro-argument. He's like giving, hey, I'm going to play devil's advocate even. He does that. I play devil's advocate for the argument. I present the argument. But then he says, and then he says, well, actually, you guys, no, that's not good. That's wrong.
Does this, Martin, that was the guy's name, did he talk about the man? Like, does this have any effect on why men have?
So if a man has long hair, it's sucking the semen back into his head instead of letting it go down.
Yeah, I guess I was the head covering or lack of head covering for the man.
He shouldn't have his hair covered, and it's going to older men actually are bald.
You said that Jews had coverings going out of exile from Egypt, right? Did they get that? Did they believe that their semen was coming from their head back there, or was this a Greek idea?
This is a Greek idea.
So then that doesn't make sense that Paul is saying, yes, head coverings so that your semen, because you guys need a covering and you don't want to have long hair because of the semen. He's just repeating what the Hellenistic Jews were saying. And then he contradicts. He says, no, you guys, stop.
Yeah. Well, let's see.
But he's not pro.
What is Paul's usual thing in an argument, though? He says,
what you guys believe.
If eating food sacrificed to idols, they're not real gods, it doesn't matter. It's food. Eat it.
Yeah.
But if somebody of weaker faith is there and sees you eating it, don't do it so that you're not leading them into sin.
So he's worried about the angels then.
So it's the same sort of argument. If somebody's believing that you're prancing around naked because your head isn't covered in worship, just cover your head so you're not causing somebody to stop believing or to get the wrong idea.
Okay. Now, if he had said, go ahead and cover your head for modesty's sake, I'd be all over that. Yeah, I can see that. I can agree with that. But he doesn't say that. He says, you be the judge. Her hair is her glory. It acts as a covering. But your ending argument is to keep angels from procreating with our women. That's what you just said.
I'm just saying
that's the main thing. I'm like, no, I don't think so.
My argument is that he's talking about being modest. Where the angels come in is that weird verse because of the angels, which is just weird. And
well, it's not weird. He's just addressing that a folk, like something that people believed in.
Right.
He's just addressing what a bunch of people believed in. All these Hellenistic Jews, they took the Greek idea of the hair being, what's it called? Impregnable. Not impregnable, but pregnable, sorry. Impregnable. And then the idea about angels. And then the idea about angels, these Corinthians, they had some weird ideas about hair and coverings. That's what he's addressing. But I mean, I just thought I saw you jumping into this is evidence about Paul's
No.
belief about Nephilim and our need to cover, because it seems like you're saying he
No,
should cover his hair
he's saying
before the
that
angels.
he is saying that it's possible.
I don't think so. It's not saying it's possible, he's saying you believe this.
The way you read it, it kind of sounds like he's saying it. Paul's saying it.
Yeah, it's just a common argument for Paul to say what other people believe, and it sounds
Yeah.
like he's saying that.
But the biggest thing is, what I was trying to point out is, as late as 2004, everybody, the best commentaries at the time said we had absolutely no idea what Paul's saying here.
So the whole testicle thing, that's just supposed to fix fix an issue that it says the woman should, the hair is a covering, but then
what
a
he's-
covering that's other than your hair, so that's what he's trying to do there is explain.
Right. Why Martin brought up the testicle aspect of it is the hair, according to Greek medicine at the time, which was contemporary at Paul's time, they are saying that this is part of the women's reproductive system. And
Right. But to go back to, I guess the way Eric's reading it, right, is it like, okay, well, first he says your head has to be covered, but then it says your hair is a covering, so, okay.
yeah, and
Problem
that's
solved.
why it's
But
such
he's
a contentious
suggesting,
thing.
Martin is saying, well, it actually says your hair is a testicle, or your hair is like a sexual
yeah,
organ, so in his mind, it's like,
if somebody has
you
a
still
problem,
need a covering because your hair isn't a covering in the sense of
right.
like what you were thinking of,
Yes.
which is that. So there's
What,
just two
what
different ways
Paul
to
is
look
saying
at it.
is, yes, it's her glory. It's a beautiful thing. It's part of human nature and should be celebrated. But if it's causing contention in the church, be modest.
Doesn't say be modest here.
It doesn't say be modest. No,
Okay,
it doesn't.
yeah, I know. So it
So-
doesn't say that. So why do we need to say it?
Because that's the essence of what he's saying. Is it's a passage about modesty.
To me, it's a passage about contentiousness and bringing up all these religious rules. Like, let's have these religious rules that we have to follow, and we need to do this. And he's saying, listen, no, I brought you grace. Don't get yourself back under those religious rules. He says that to other churches too, I think. That was often his message. Like, hey guys, I gave you grace. I only preached Christ and Him crucified. Thank goodness thank God I didn't baptize you guys. Stop arguing over these religious rules. Instead, realize that they don't matter. They don't matter. Stop arguing.
The other aspect of it is you have to understand the context of the culture that he's writing to.
Yeah.
Aphrodite was a major temple in Corinth.
Just on the road a bit.
So why didn't he say, guys, cover your hair?
I think it's interesting. You guys both have, I think, a different approach to something that doesn't matter. Yeah, because that's the spirit of Paul's. These rules don't. It's like I feel like sometimes when Jared, I hear you say well, it doesn't matter, so just you might as well do it in order to not cause contention or strife. And Eric, I think you're saying it doesn't matter, so why do it or make people do it?
Jared
It
was
doesn't
saying
matter,
for modesty's sake, and we don't want to get confused with orgies. So it's a bit different.
I guess almost reputational maybe, or
So-
community relationships.
And common saying in
Let's-
modern times.
Let's bring it back to today.
A common saying in modern times is perception is 9/10 of the law.
How many of your parents made you change your clothes before you went out?
Not mine.
Somebody's not.
So,
I'm gonna tell you, my mom let me dress myself, and
I remember many times when my sister
This is
was
what
going
we're
on a
supposed to say, we
date
can
and my
tell
mom
the
said
way.
that she was not modest enough. She is showing too much of her body. So that's basically what
Kansas
this.
and Southern California.
Yeah. This is basically what this passage is getting at is there's people that believe that the hair is part of this overall sexual aspect of human nature and they're offended if it's being shown.
Mhm.
in a worship setting, because in most Greek and Roman worship settings, they had their heads covered unless it was sensual in nature. So as people come in, he's talking about the testimony of the church. We're getting confused with the sensual people, even though this doesn't matter. We have no rule about it in the church, but this is what if it's going to cause problems, just cover your head. So it is what he's saying.
Jared, you're right. It is about, a lot of it is about not causing offense. I think I do get triggered, though, talking about the Son of God and, like, angels procreating with women. And then, like, saying, like, Paul is pro that. And then, because to me, it's like bringing something in that's such an obscure, like, it's a little bit obscure verse. Mm-hmm. And I just so many people, like, go off the rails with Nephilim and sons of God and stuff. And so to say, like, Paul, who wrote most of our gospel, most of our good news here, and it's his good news even, he says, given to him by God, and to say that he's like saying that this could happen when that Paul believed that women could get impregnated by angels, and we should be modest for that sake. That part kind of fits. But you're right. It is partially about modesty, and like Taylor pointed out, we're both arguing for things that are both true, really. So we should probably be arguing with each other, especially if we listen to my side of the argument. But that was like but no, I see what you're saying, Jared. But I do get triggered about some of the God stuff.
Yeah, and as you should.
Yeah.
But in Paul's time, it was something that they talked about quite a bit.
Certainly
That
thought
was the line of thought that they worked off of on how that worked.
That's why it's mentioned several times in the New Testament. So next week we will be. Why is my screen doing random things? Chapter 1 in the George Fox's journal, in Volume 1, not in Volume 2. So, and Wesley, if you want to pick it up at online, you can read Chapter 1 online. The ebooks are free, but we have a copy for you here when you get here. So, anyway. Read Chapter 1, and then in 2 weeks we'll have silence. So, anyway, I told you that it was weird.
Yeah.
Was there any other
I wonder what they thought about
so.
Whether they thought it was better to have a bald guy or a very well-haired guy.
According to the Greek thought, it was best if you were bald.
Okay.
So
it meant that you've been with many women. If you have long hair, you haven't been with too many.
If you do not want to get pregnant, then you find somebody that has long hair, is what their thoughts were. And it goes in a lot more detail.
I'm sure.
It's just weird about the picture. It's only
other hygiene areas that you wouldn't think was what ancient people did, but they did.
Now I'm curious.
So, it is interesting, and I only bring it up because it's 2004 to the present is when it was brought up. Prior to 2004, everybody said we had no clue what we were talking about.
So at least this guy can have the theory.
Yeah. So.
All because they thought he was talking about testicles on the head, and that's why people were so confused about that. And use that word.
It's because it's a word that isn't used very often in the scriptures, so nobody knew how to translate it. So they assumed it was a covering because it was used as robe and as a head covering, so they didn't think that it had to do with anatomy.
That is weird. Oh, course.
So,
Oh,
Anyway.
okay. Full on high tech. I like the double my chairs, but
Oh, you want to do 2 small stacks?
two
I
small
didn't realize.
stacks.
I would have
I
let
want
you
the
do it.
falling little children, I think.
Well, yeah, I can think of that. It's
Yeah, weird
it's
ball
massive,
style.
buddy. It feels pretty sturdy.
This was unorthodox.
Thank you, Jared.
yep.
You too. Yeah, have a nice.
Good night.